me. Good morning, everyone, or good noon, everyone. This is Kristen Runge down at UW-Madison, and I'm very excited to welcome you to the second EDA University Center, brought to you by Extension, Lunch and Learn webinar. And today's topic is something we're really excited about. It's a topic that we've heard about increasingly as we're out in the field, and we have 4 wonderful speakers here ready to share what they know about childcare. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tessa Conroy, who's our moderator for today. So welcome, Tessa. Thank you for organizing this, and welcome to all of our speakers.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to be talking just briefly about childcare today, just to get us started, and then I'm actually going to hand it over to a handful of great speakers. So just to make sure we're all kind of starting maybe with a similar background, some of you may have seen the work we've been doing at the center about childcare and just trying to motivate why this is such an important topic. There are lots of on-ramps to thinking about why childcare is important, but the one we've been thinking about here is a workforce development strategy. So what I'm showing you in the current slide with my screen share is how the female labor force participation rate drops with an increase in the number of small children in a community. And so when we're talking about a labor shortage and thinking about groups of people we might be able to increase their labor force participation to help alleviate that shortage, women in particular seem to be a group of people that we could, approach with a strategy for childcare that might increase their labor force participation. And what you see in the bar chart is that for women from ages 25 to 54, which is the meat of the labor force, it's our prime age workers, women are participating in the labor force at lower rates at every one of those age categories. I did a little back of the envelope math on that. If we had women participating in the labor force at the same rate as men, it would be about 70,000 additional people in the labor force. I don't expect that childcare is, the barrier for every single one of these women, but it's certainly a large pool of people that we're talking about. So with that in mind, kind of, with some understanding of maybe why this issue is important, I think a lot of you are hearing your own stories of why this is important in your communities. I wanted to spend today talking about strategies. So I've invited people who know a lot more than I do. I have Jessie Small with us. Jessie is a project manager from Task. She's a CEO of R&D project manager with the CEO R&D projects. She's going to be talking about dependent care FSAs and some task-led initiatives. They've been doing some work to look at their own policies internally and kind of how they measure up to other businesses when it comes to their childcare related policies. I have Courtney Berner. She's the executive director of the UW Center for Cooperatives. She's going to be talking about 3 different cooperative models for childcare and kind of what she's seen, some pros and cons of them. And then Paula Drew. Paula is from the Early Care and Education, she is an Early Care and Education Research and Policy Analyst at WICA, the Wisconsin Early Childhood Association. She can tell us about the shared services model. She has some information about what Organic Valley has been doing, for example. And then last, one of our own educators, Carl Green in La Crosse, has been leading a childcare task force. So he'll be sharing us kind of what's happening with his community there. So with that said, I want to go ahead and turn it over to Jessie as our first speaker. So welcome, Jessie. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Tessa. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. This is one of many beautiful doors I see opening in the community to start the dialogue about issues around childcare. And I believe Task can bring this unique perspective. So as you listen today, if you walk away with only my contact information, I feel like that's a win. This information takes a few iterations to really hit home. And I welcome a call or email at any time as we move forward. So Tessa, I do have a PowerPoint presentation, but I'm wondering if it's just going to be a little complex to show. You're welcome. What do you feel like?
You're welcome to share if you just want to share your screen with the audience.
Okay, let me see what I can do here.
Should be at this kind of center at the bottom. Share screen in green. Great. Looks like we had it for a second and then we lost it. Jesse, are you there?
Am I still here?
Yes, we can
Okay.
hear you, Jesse.
Sorry.
Your screen
You
was
just can't see my screen.
right. We could for a second and then the image faded. So you had it.
Okay. Okay. Well, it's okay. It's not that important. I'll just talk to it, and if I can share it with you after the
That's
session.
Fine. Sure.
Okay. So just starting a little bit about myself. I've been with TAS since 2006. I took 4 years off to be a stay-at-home mom, but I returned to TAS when my kids started school. So my kids are now 6 and 7, and the quality and cost of childcare 7 years later is still a sensitive topic. So it just proves that it's not getting any better. And maybe that's why I'm so passionate about this specific issue. So a little bit about TAS. We're a nationwide held company. It's privately held. It's a third-party administrator for health and wealth fringe benefits located here in Madison. We're celebrating our 45th year in business, and we continually are active as everyday philanthropists in the community. TAS products and services are sold by brokers who then are selling those, a portfolio of products to an employer. So we have roughly 60,000 employer relationships that are nationwide that we have accounts such as flexible spending accounts, health reimbursement accounts, or HSAs. You might have heard those types of terms before. But about 2 years ago, TAS joined a community initiative called We Care for Dane Kids. And We Care for Dane Kids is an initiative focused on 4 strategies on increasing the supply of childcare and also meeting the demands of parents and employers. But where TAS can assist in this initiative is with the business community. So through the employer, we feel we can be an influence of those businesses to help them really understand the life struggles parents are faced with today, especially for women who are often faced with those tough choices of leaving or staying in the workforce. So we see 3 focus areas where TAS can be most impactful. One is sharing information on tax strategies and or subsidy programs related to childcare, providing creative strategies for employers to help employees save for retirement earlier in their careers. And lastly, TAS can set the example for employers to offer a supportive and family-friendly environment. So let me share just a little on each of those 3 strategies. So the first strategy is a tax saving strategy for parents, because oftentimes taxes are viewed as complicated or cumbersome, and they just don't understand the benefit that they're actually receiving at the end of the day. And in our industry, we typically overcomplicate things. That's just what we do. But we don't break it down in terms of of parents that they actually understand. For example, if a family were to say, if I were to say to my family, you would save $100 a month. That's diapers. You know, for a baby, or it's, you know, a nice night out with your family. If you were to participate in a dependent care FSA, that would mean something much different than if I were to market towards you and say you're going to save 30% if you participate in a dependent care FSA, or you know, you're going to get $1,200 of savings for a year. That doesn't mean anything to me. But in the past, our market or our industry has marketed towards those big ambiguous numbers because they're afraid of putting a hard dollar number into what that savings might be, because every situation is different. And we're taking the approach now, it doesn't matter. These parents need to understand the value of these tax programs and really understand how to maximize the tax strategy to get those families in a financial situation that makes saving for the future more effective. So another example of an additional tax program that I think is a misnomer in our community is a child and dependent care tax credit program. Some parents believe that the 2 strategies, the 2 tax programs, are mutually exclusive and or one is better than the other. And in some cases it is, but for our middle class families who are offered a dependent FSA, they should be taking, for the maximum tax benefit, $5,000 in a dependent care FSA But in addition, if they have 2 or more children, taking the additional $1,000 in the child independent tax credit to maximize their tax-free dollars. So we know that employers right now at a roughly a rate of 70% of employers are offering a dependent care FSA, but we know the participation rate is around 3 to 4%. So there's a tremendous opportunity for our market in our industry to do a better job on helping these parents understand these tax saving strategies a little bit further. I'm going to pause there. Any questions so far?
So Jessie, these are both programs that are going to let parents pay for some care with pre-tax dollars, and that's where the savings happens. Is that right?
That one is, so the dependent care FSA would be a pre-tax dollar that comes out of your paycheck every time you're paid, and those dollars are withheld before the employer calculates payroll taxes. So that would be considered a pre-tax benefit. The child independent tax credit, you might have heard that when you do your taxes, you can save a tax credit of $6,000. That's something different, and I can go into that a little deeper at a different time. It is a little more complicated, but the idea behind it is these 2 benefits are available. They have the same eligibility, but the tax math is factored differently, and it's a matter of just knowing how to plug and play those numbers to your benefit. That makes sense?
Yeah, and the savings accounts, is that something where, you know, we as extension educators, if we have an employer who says, hey, you know, I want to get in the game and kind of be part of the solution for childcare, is that something that we can encourage them to explore offering, or that we can talk to them about how to increase enrollment?
Absolutely. So in 2020, we are trying to market towards the consumer versus our strategy, which in past is marketing towards the employer. So we do have some flyers built and a website built, and I can certainly share that after this session so that they can share it broadly with who are asking these types of questions.
Great.
Jessie,
cool.
Do
Yeah.
both of these programs, the dependent FSA and the independent tax credit, need to be sponsored by the employee, or can the by the employer, or can the employee do them independent of sponsorship by the employee?
So the dependent care FSA needs to be sponsored by an employer. So the only way to participate in that program is to have an employer offer that benefit. The child independent tax credit is independent of any employer relationship. So they can take that on their 1040 when they do their tax filings.
Thank you.
But it was my understanding that on your personal income tax, there was opportunities to write off dependent care expenses up to roughly $5,000 if you have not taken the FSA deal.
Yeah, and that's right, and that's the difference between the two. Is you can take $5,000 in dependent care FSA and or $1,000 in the child independent tax credit, or $6,000 in the child independent tax credit. I can send more information after this call. It's a little complicated to explain, you know, in this type of setting. So I can definitely send more information after.
That's great, Jessie. We'll just clarify with some materials following up.
That's great. Yeah, I'll keep going because I know I only have 10 minutes. I have other people behind me. So the other opportunity for us to get information in front of the employers to then share with the employees is around subsidies. And how TASC describes or defines subsidies is any form of payment that causes a reduction in the cost of childcare. So I will give you a list. I have a very nice list of what we define as childcare subsidies that could be considered as an employer either benefit, or the employer could provide to the employees as, hey, did you know that this is out there and you should maybe research this. But specifically, our products for the most tax advantageous is for the middle class. What I'm wanting to do with the low income families is to ensure that employers are recognizing those employees that do have children who may qualify for city, state, and federal subsidy programs. So I think through our efforts in educating on the tax strategies, we can also do a better job of helping employers have the information to share with their employees that are in that low income range. The second thing that we're doing is called a private letter ruling. I will share the information after too, but it's in this case, Task as the employer is applying to the IRS through an application called a private letter ruling. And it's asking the IRS to allow child care expenses to be considered as a defined contribution for Task's 401k. So why is this important? So by changing the definition of what is considered a defined contribution in a 401k, employees are able to receive the employer match into their 401k. Many employers today require employees to contribute to their 401k to receive the employer match. It's a pay to play type of game. So we're not recreating the wheel in any stretch of the imagination. We're actually following the lead of a similar private letter ruling submitted in 2018. And now it's expected to be considered an IRS regulation in 2020 that will allow all employees to show a receipt of student loan payment as a defined contribution to receive an employer match. So it's our belief that families who are struggling financially to pay for childcare are also leaving employer match dollars on the table as a missed opportunity. And then I'll just briefly go through and lastly, what I think Task could do a better job in is just helping our community and lead by example of some family-friendly practices that we're doing today that help our employees that have young children. And what we've seen in the recruitment process, and one of the best strategies of attracting and retaining employees is our flexible schedule. So come in early, stay late, make up hours for an appointments or sick days, working remote with some general guidelines about how our remote offices should be set up, are all things that as remote employees or people that have professional jobs kind of take for granted. But those people that struggle getting kids to school and picking up kids from school, the flexible schedule is a lifesaver. So just being able to be flexible in more than just the professional positions has been a huge benefit for Task. We also do an unrestricted employer benefit contribution, which means that we give every employee $1,000 and we say, you have $1,000 in cash. Based on your life, you make the best choice on that $1,000 and put it into whatever benefit you think is going to help your family. So that could be that we put that employer contribution into a dependent care FSA. So encouraging those employers to make an employer contribution is good for business, it's good for your employees. It's also a tax deduction for the business. So just making sure that that is something that we are doing as an employer, but encouraging others to do it as well.
That sounds fantastic. Can I take some of that information you have? This is Kristen speaking, and put it on our website so that folks can access after we're done with the call today?
You bet. I can definitely send some information your way. It might not be today, but it will definitely be in the future.
All right. I appreciate that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So back to you, Tessa.
Thanks so much for being our resource for us, Jessie. I'm excited to get the details out to our team here. So next, Courtney, if you could tell us a little bit about the cooperative models and what you've seen work and maybe not work as well.
Absolutely. Here, let me try and share my screen. Oh. There. All right. All right. Are we, is it being shared? Can you all see it? Yep.
Yes,
great.
We can see it.
All right. Thank you so much, Tessa. So as Tessa said, I'm Courtney Berner, the Executive Director at the University of Wisconsin Center for Cooperatives, and I'm about to set my timer, so I have sense. There we go. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk a bit about how the cooperative model is being used to address what I would call a childcare crisis in our country. And I just want to say from the outset that we do a lot of work in childcare and home care, and I don't think that the economy is working for most people in either of those industries, neither the consumers or the workers. And so the cooperative model certainly does not fix that. I think we would all probably agree that some policy interventions are needed. But the cooperative model, I like to say, sort of is able to round out some of the rough edges while we work on some of the bigger issues. So let's get into it here. First, before we get started, what is a cooperative? I wouldn't be doing my educator role if I didn't start there. So a co-op is an enterprise that is owned and democratically controlled by the people who use its services. So a cooperative operates to benefit its members, not to maximize profits for outside investors. So people who use the cooperative own the co-op because they finance it in a variety of ways. They share in both the business risks and the business profits, and each cooperative determines what level of financial participation is required. Members democratically control their cooperative by exercising the voting rights that come with membership. And in Wisconsin, each member is typically entitled to 1 vote. And again, the cooperative's primary benefit to the member is providing needed products and services. In this case, childcare, or we'll talk about some other services that co-ops are providing. And then all or part of a cooperative's net operating profits might be distributed to those members in proportion to their use. So just quick and dirty on the co-op model, just so you have a basic understanding of what we're talking about here. So when I talk about a few of the different models, and I know Tessa said 3 because that's what I told her, and then I snuck in an additional model. So really want to talk about 4 different ways that the cooperative model is being used in childcare. And if there are folks out there on the Zoom call that have been in the childcare space for a long time, or people that you're working with who've been in the childcare space for a long time, they're typically most familiar with that first bullet, the parent-led cooperatives. And I have to say that most people that I've encountered who are in early childhood education sort of cringe at parent-led cooperatives and their experiences with them. But most cooperatives in childcare historically have been parent-led. So they're typically organized as nonprofits that have a center director. They typically have 501c3 status, and then they have a board of directors that's made up of parents, and then certain requirements for parent participation. It could be bringing snacks once a week. It could be actually volunteering in the classroom. It could just be serving on the board. The goals when a parent-led cooperative is started are often related to reducing the cost of care for those families that are paying for care, while simultaneously providing the best sort of care education environment for the students. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through these 4 different kinds, talk a little bit about the pros and cons, and then actually show you a couple different actual examples of these different kinds. So I would say that the pros of a parent-led situation is that the model is pretty well known. There are a lot of them out there, a lot of information for folks interested in starting parent-led cooperatives. Parents tend to be very invested in the success of the center. That volunteer labor that I talked about can reduce costs, which then can potentially either just reduce costs or potentially raise wages for workers. They seem to very easily be able to achieve 501c3 status because most of them are organized technically as nonprofits with this elected parent board. Some of the cons, and we certainly run into this, I have a 3-year-old, so I'm deep in childcare, early childhood education myself, and I'm familiar with the challenges of finding care that's really high quality and affordable, is that parents are often busy. Most parents are sending their children to daycare or to childcare because they're working. So having a board that is parent-led and having parents involved can pose challenges in terms of consistent participation across membership. And the membership is transient because eventually members' kids leave the daycare cooperative, and so you have sort of this a revolving door depending upon how the range of ages that you provide care to of parents. So those are some challenges, but it is the best known model, but I would say that's not where I see a lot of the activity now in terms of starting new cooperatives. Worker-owned cooperatives are the situation where a group of caregivers actually bands together to own and operate the center. They participate in decisions that affect their work. They share in the business profits. I would say that the pros are it's an opportunity to maximize wages and benefits to employees, really increase workforce motivation and engagement. It's also a really good option for owners of existing childcare centers who want to retire and exit their business. I'm in conversation with a group right now that is exploring selling their childcare center to the employees. One of the cons is that I've noticed that it can be a bit harder to get the 501c3 status because the business is worker owned, and so there are some creative workarounds to that. We have some materials on our website. It can also be a little bit harder to start as a grassroots co-op. Many of the newer worker owned childcare cooperatives are sort of incubated by other nonprofits that are interested either in providing employment to immigrant communities, for example, or who are interested in for some reason addressing this gap in childcare availability. Employer assisted is the next group, and this is an area that I've seen a lot of traction and interest in, where employers see the lack of childcare as having negative impacts on their ability to recruit and retain employees, particularly in rural communities. So they're actually coming together and finding ways to subsidize care, either by providing facilities at a lower reduced cost, some in-kind assistance during the startup or operations, potential like shared services and shared equipment. Sometimes they, provide reduced costs to go to care to their employees. They actually contribute to the cost of care. So these can look differently. The one that I'll talk about it in a minute is actually, the goal is to transition it to a parent-led cooperative, but it's currently run by this group of employers, this group of enterprises within a region. And so, because of all the ways in which those employers might subsidize the program, there is an opportunity again to reduce costs to the consumer and increase wages to the workers. The cons, it sort of like doesn't automatically result in a more motivated workforce or reduce costs, and sort of that who owns it is a little fuzzier. But that's a model that a lot of employers are looking towards. And lastly, I just want to mention the shared services cooperative model. And a shared services cooperative or a purchasing cooperative, so Ace Hardware is a purchasing cooperative. It's a cooperative of businesses that band together to get better pricing on services or goods. And then they may end up doing other things together, like shared marketing. In the case of a childcare, a childcare cooperative, it might be for in-home childcare providers that are actually banding together, or small centers. Maybe they're doing joint meal planning, joint special programs. It increases their buying power. Maybe they hire someone to do their administrative work for them, and they share that person. So again, the ability to share, some of the pros are reducing costs, improving programming potentially, and efficiency if you're able to hire people that can provide services to many centers that an individual center may not be able to provide. One of the cons, I don't know if it's actually a con, but is you do have to reach a great enough scale in order to pay for that coordination of services and to really maximize the benefits of a shared services co-op. So couple quick examples. Parent-led, this is right in our backyard here in Madison. I have a friend whose daughter just started here actually on Tuesday, or maybe it was Monday. Tenney Nursery and Parent Center has been around for quite some time. It's organized as a nonprofit preschool. They have a board, again, made up of parents and staff on the board. They have an executive director, and parent participation is required in order to have your child go there. And so this has been a really successful model here in Madison. Worker-owned Beyond Care Child Care Cooperative is in Brooklyn, New York. And this is really offers a different set of services. So instead of having one physical center, they offer nanny services, nanny shares, after hours rapid childcare, and group childcare. So this is designed, it was founded in 2008 by 17 immigrant women. And this business was incubated by the Center for Family Life in Brooklyn. They've grown to 38 members. And so their goal is really to promote living wages, in addition to, of course, exemplary care for children, living wages, and social supports and educational opportunities for their members. And as you can see from the types of services they're offering, they're meeting the needs of their clientele there in New York. And so different communities have different needs. And this group has decided, instead of having a center, they actually connect their members as nannies, or providing more sort of babysitting, sort of on-demand care for potential customers. And lastly, this is an example of an employer-assisted, and this is a relatively new co-op. It's called the Energy Capital Cooperative Childcare. It's in North Dakota. We did a PowerPoint presentation. It was part of, I don't remember. We did a whole series of webinars on cooperatives, and this cooperative was featured in our webinar on home care and childcare. It was basically a coalition of community businesses and institutions, some of which were cooperatives, that came together. They were motivated by the childcare needs of their employees and members of their community. And so they offer sort of a hybrid of what the two previous models offer. They do have a center that offers full-time, part-time care, and they also have some really flexible scheduling options. So people who have sort of non-traditional work hours are able to get care that meets their work needs. They are planning to transition the board. So the board is currently made up of people from those founding partners, and then as the co-op and the operations stabilize, the goal is that those partners will transition to more of a new sort of oversight role, and that board will be made up of parents. I could see a situation where the group would decide to transition to actual ownership by workers instead of parents, but this is the option that they've decided to take. So there's a lot more information about that co-op in that webinar, which is on our website. So I just want to close and say thank you. We have on our website a whole page that's dedicated to resources related to educational cooperatives, including early childhood education. So we have, again, the types and examples of childcare cooperatives, that webinar that I mentioned. We have some childcare cooperative document templates that can be really useful for groups exploring this, and a list of organizations that support childcare cooperatives. So we are certainly receiving a lot of inquiries about this, which doesn't surprise me. I always say, look for where people are hurting in the economy, and there you will find sort of your next set of cooperative development projects. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We have supported a few different groups around the state who have explored these different models, and would be happy to do the same for you. So I'll stop there.
Thanks so much, Courtney. As you guys can tell, I have done each of my speakers a disservice in not giving them enough time. They're really wonderful resources, and I'll do my best to connect those of you who reach out for more information with those speakers, and we'll get you the details. So with that, I'll turn it over to Paula. Paula is from the Wisconsin Early Childhood Association, and she's going to dive more into the shared services that Courtney nicely previewed for us.
Hi everybody, I'm going to share my screen too, so let's see if this works. Did that work? Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, I'm gonna try this part. Okay, so I work here at WECA, Wisconsin Early Childhood Association. We do a number of programs that specifically focus on the childcare workforce. So we have a Teach Scholarship program that helps with higher education credits. We also have Reward Wage Stipend, which helps a little bit with additional wages for folks in the workforce. For family childcare, we help with the federal food program. And the Wisconsin Early Education Shared Services Network is our newest program. I'm really excited to be involved in this work. And that's what I'm going to tell you about today. A childcare provider's work. So I'm thinking predominantly here of either a family childcare provider or an administrator. So these this is sort of like administrative level stuff that has to happen in a day, in a week, in a month, is often very diverse, disjointed, and feels overwhelming. And what the field would prefer is if it kind of somehow worked together so there was a stronger feeling of work-life balance. What we are seeing now is that the burnout that predominantly resided with teachers in classrooms is definitely transitioning to the administrative levels. We're seeing a lot of turnover with administration and also with family child care programs going unregulated because the feeling is a bit overwhelming of all of these sort of puzzle pieces that we're trying to put together, and then they, fall back apart, and it's this constant push and pull in addition to trying to run a quality childcare program for children. So what shared services does is it takes independent family, group, and after-school programs and connects them together so that they can share resources and supports with the idea of allowing them to capitalize on economies of scale and expertise. So they can stay small where small is important, so that's kind of meeting the needs of their families. So maybe their program is dual language. Maybe, there's a specific cultural focus. So they could just stay small and keep their mission and do what they do. But they also get to be large in terms of, Courtney mentioned a few of these things. So things that help when you're bigger, joint purchasing. So we have a purchasing collaborative. So instead of buying paper for one program, we're buying paper for 20 programs at a cost savings. We are doing on-site sort of coaching and mentoring with administrators and family providers, organized around goals that they have set in collaboration with us to help maybe be able to offer health insurance for their employees, to do succession planning if there's going to be a direct retirement, to do budgeting, to do strategic planning. So this is kind of like a individual based programmatic level, like here's the things that I need help with that I never have time to focus on. A lot of those goals we are using technology systems to reach. So what can we take from pencil and paper and move to a data collection system so that it's more accurate and takes you less time to complete. We're also doing collaborative professional development in a number of ways. So you'll see the slide next for the cohorts that we're working in, but I think I'm going to stop myself for a minute and just mention. So we're working with 3 different cohorts throughout Wisconsin right now. We're working in Vernon and Monroe County, and we've been doing that work for a full year. We are also just got off the ground in Milwaukee, so we've had full funding for a month. But we've been doing some significant work there in the past 3 years, working up to this point. And then my work predominantly focuses in Dane County, and we officially received funding in August. So we've got 3 different cohorts and their specific needs. Some of them are really context specific. So this is sort of like the package of what we've come up with to offer. But there is a specific dosage and sort of more concentration on some things depending on which area we're in. In Vernon and Monroe County, providers really wanted access to a substitute teacher pool, and they really wanted some high quality professional development. So those are the things that we rolled up first because they were saying, I sort of hear what you're saying about technology, but I'm not anywhere near ready to go there yet. What we need now to keep our classrooms open is we need substitute teachers. We need to learn about ASQ screenings. And so that's kind of where we started there. In Dane County, we started with technology, and we are helping people either maximize tech solutions that they have, or we are onboarding them with a childcare management software if they don't have one, to sort of automate a lot of the required reporting that they need to do. And then for Milwaukee, a really neat thing that we're doing there that I'm hoping becomes a greater part of the other two cohorts too, is we're working with a lot of community partners for like the library, Milwaukee Public Schools, some other local organizations to sort of wrap supports around the childcare program so that it sort of looks like a community school, an elementary community school, if anybody's familiar with those. So those are the different types of activities that we are offering within our shared services network here. And then this map kind of shows you where we're currently working. And then we have some projects sort of in the works. So Courtney was talking about cooperatives, and we are working with Jackson County, who is developing a cooperative model that we as a shared services network will come in and work with programs that are part of that cooperative model. So that is really interesting for me because part of the work when we get started is creating relationships within the community to see what might be available for programs, what, you know, resource mapping, what exists there. And this cooperative is already doing that work, which is really neat. And then we're also contracting with a few counties within the Southwest corridor to just see, would it be the right thing to start a shared services network there? So is there community support? Are there enough childcare programs that would be interested in participating in a shared services network? What are the challenges? What's unregulated childcare look like there? Are there sticking points that we may be able to do some hand-holding to get family providers into regulation? So those are sort of the next two areas that this year we will be doing more work in. And as Courtney said, the more programs that are a part of the network, the stronger the services we are able to provide from them. Now, currently, each of our cohorts is grant funded, so it's free for providers to be able to join and to take advantage of any of these services. And I'll just go back to this for a minute. The substitute teacher pool is the only thing that programs pay a portion of. So they pay, so WICA, we hire and train and pay a salary to the substitute teachers. They get a good salary and benefits, so we can train them. They're going to be great, and they're going to stay within the shared substitute pool. And then they are available to programs within the network at a subsidized price of $10 per hour. And we kind of did some outreach to see what would be feasible for programs to pay. Now, what it costs us is a little over 3 times that to pay somebody, but it allows us to take that grant funding we have and spread it out so that the substitute teachers can be more widely available to programs. At the bottom, the pink puzzle piece there, it says Wiser Platform, and that's an online resource platform that WICA developed for the state of Wisconsin that just has a number of high quality early childhood resources for in the classroom, for teachers, for family engagement, for business related administrative stuff. And there's also a hiring tool on there to allow programs to post jobs. So I think I'm just about at my time, but I'll just throw up this last slide. It has my contact information on it. And like everybody else said, I will send out some more information specifically on shared services. Jesse mentioned the We Care for Dane Kids. That's the Shared Services Network in Dane County is funded through there. So I have a nice one-pager that shares a little bit more about that. And then we have a national partner, the Opportunities Exchange, and they give sort of like national level technical assistance for folks who are wanting to start up shared services networks. And I think they'd be a great resource too.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Paula.
You are welcome.
So I'll just take a moment to summarize here, because what I've tried to do is tap into this expertise so that we can see sort of a range of potential ways to move forward on childcare. So we had Jesse talking to us about employers getting involved with offering benefits such as the Dependent Care FSA, as well as some other tax advantage or tax credit programs. Courtney offered us 3 different cooperative models that a community or that we might be worth exploring. And then we have Paula with the shared services model that already has some traction in several communities in Wisconsin. So what I hope is that this is just giving you a little taste of some options that are out there. And I'm of course happy to connect you or get more information, share with you what Paula, Jesse, and Courtney have shared with me. So just reach out. The last speaker is Carl Green. I'm really excited for Carl to share with us what he's doing in La Crosse with his task force. So Carl, please take it away.
All right, I'm just starting to share my screen. Can you guys all see it?
Yes, we can see it, Carl. Thanks.
Okay, great. So I have been working actually with a regional organization, the Seven Rivers Alliance, that was tasked after they did a sort of a regional analysis of some of the issues happening in the greater area, not just La Crosse County, but probably a 7 county area around La Crosse County. And 3 issues came up: workforce, attraction and retention, housing, and then childcare. And so we started looking at, and we wanted to get data on issues that were happening within childcare in the area, and then in particular La Crosse County. We worked with our Parenting Place, which is a non-for-profit that actually does some of the certification for childcare, the childcare industry in the area. And they provided the next couple data sets that I'm going to be showing you. The part of the issue that we're seeing is that people aren't able to find childcare. In 1998, there were 450 childcare businesses in La Crosse County, and in 2019, there were 100. That number has continually dropped. It's actually less than 100 now. They put this together that illustrates some of the quality and or regulatory changes that maybe led to some of those differences in the amount of childcare available. Everything from the Growth and Quality pilot project that started in 2007, Young Stars implementation in 2011, day camps required to enroll in various programming, and then you can see in that we have the range of stuff that happened after 2008 when the economy crashed. You know, that probably led to some people looking at providing childcare in an unregulatory manner as being some of the competition that might have fueled some of the exiting from the actual professional childcare. To look at those numbers as new care providers that were added versus ones that closed, we just see that over time, and in particular post-2008, that a lot of the areas just closed their providers. Some of the issues, and what's really frustrating about this, is that it's such a double issue, where not only are people complaining that they're paying too much, but then the childcare providers, they're not getting rich, and they're not providing, you know, just wealth of money to the employees within the childcare industry. So a lot of the childcare providers are saying that they can't find employees because those employees that have some sort of a background, in particular, if they're Young Star certified, that then they can get a job in a school or into some other position that is higher paying and with more benefits. Again, because you're also then competing with unregulated care, which is going to be probably somewhat less expensive because it's not regulated. There might not be the concern of the parents for the number of kids that the provider has. Now you're competing with that, which is a little bit of an unfair advantage. And then there's just issues with retirements, regulatory compliance, and child care center directors just simply leaving after a career in the system. So we're seeing more people that are leaving the system than new providers being added. So again, I talked about this partnership that that was looking at what can we do about childcare in the area. We put together a survey and we rolled that out within employers in La Crosse County, including the La Crosse County as an employee base. So we got 490 responses from families that had one or more children in childcare. There's about 12,000 or so households with kids under 18 in La Crosse County, so we had a relatively high enough response rate that we have confidence that this represents the numbers in the county. One thing I think that was interesting is that you see a pretty precipitous difference or drop between the number of kids in childcare and the number of kids in a family, and it's really 1 or 2 kids that people are having. There are some that have 3 or 4 or 5, but the majority being 1 or 2 kids in childcare. This breaks out of our respondees the monthly income of the household. The 45 to 5,000 is around the median income for a monthly income for a household. So we really have about as many that are beneath that as are above it. And that's, I guess, would be expected. But to see then where that breakout of what they're paying for childcare and what the number of kids that they have and how that then breaks out with incomes, it's pretty mixed. Everybody in these different incomes have similar number of kids in childcare, and they're faced with this issue of trying to pay for it. And then this represents how much they're paying and the number of kids that they have in childcare. So you can see that some people might still be paying in the $500 to $1,000 range a month, and yet they might only have 1 kid in childcare. The benefit, I think, of this is that it illustrates really where the most common range of income or of costs were, and that's that $500 to $1,000. And we're seeing usually it's around $200 a kid, and so that would equate to about $800, $900 a week. And then depending on the number of kids and the number of weeks you're paying for, that's just why it's the most common payment range. And then the type of care that people are paying for, again, there's going to be variations in that type of care. Some are paying for a regulated child care. That was about 56% of the people that responded. Some are paying for before and after school child care. Some are just paying a relative to provide child care. Some are paying an unregulated child care provider to provide child care. And you can see it drops then into babysitters, friends, just unable to find childcare. That was really just to try to see what people are paying, who's paying for what as far as their incomes compared to what they're paying, and to see how many kids that they have and to see if there's some correlations between that. I think the big takeaway that I've learned in a lot of this stuff is really the connection between childcare and the workforce issue. And I put together this that illustrates the top 25 jobs and the wages that those jobs pay. The blue represents the number of jobs in the La Crosse metropolitan statistical area, and the yellow represents the median, or the mean wage of that industry, that type of job. And the red line represents what one childcare, or what the cost of 1 kid in childcare would be. And you can see that there's quite a few jobs, if you look at, again, the wage being the yellow, that are getting very close to be at least half of the wage going to the cost of childcare. When you get 2 kids in there, there's quite a few of our jobs, our most common job being retail salespeople, that can't afford childcare. And so basically all of these industries that are underneath this red line are going to say that they don't have a wage that's supportive to pay somebody that has kids in childcare to work for them. And that's really I think the story that is the most interesting to me is how does that melding between the expense of childcare affect people dropping out of the workforce because they simply can't afford to work to afford childcare. Some of the takeaways that we've seen, and then I'll talk a little bit briefly about the efforts that we're doing. Parents are struggling with finding and affording childcare providers. So it's not that they are just having trouble affording it, but it's finding the child care providers. At that same time that parents are struggling to afford it, child care centers are closing because they can't find adequate workforce. As they try to, if they raise their costs, you know, they're caught in this catch-22. If they raise their costs, they're going to lose clients. If they don't raise their costs, they're going to lose their employees to other industries. Childcare is a service industry. When we looked at some of our existing childcare centers, they pay anywhere between 70 and 90% of expenses on employee wages. There's very little room to create any sort of profit margin when you have that much going, you know, it's directly to your employee wage. There's not places that they can cut on other expenses other than wages. So that makes that issue of the profit margin and profitability of these child cares very strict and very difficult to maneuver within. We've seen the numeric ratios for child care service providers. It creates really a ceiling on profitability because, and I wouldn't argue that these are not necessary, but it's just a ceiling that isn't in some other industries, and then that creates this limit on how profitable a child care service center can be. And then what they'll say is that they're often the 0 to 2, it's a loss leader where they're losing money, but they hope to make it up in the 3 and 4-year-olds. And then we have a pre-K program that's within all of our local school districts. They lose then that most profitable client after they start going to the pre-K programs in the local school districts. So, you know, we've talked about, does it make sense to include like a 3K program? What that would actually do is put more child care providers out of business. And so it's really working with our schools to determine how do we offer these services, offer some sort of cost sharing to make sure that we're not putting more child care providers out of business while we're trying to find a solution. Again, some of the workforce impacts, it impacts the work issue as parents that are working they might decide it's going to be too expensive to work and they end up quitting. Many jobs in our area can't support a parent paying for childcare, especially if they have 2 kids or more. I would ask the question rhetorically, do all industries have the ability to raise wages to cover their workers' childcare expenses equally? A retail store, downtown business might not have that ability as much as a healthcare system or a university. And then when do HR expenses for an employer outpace the wage expenses for the employees with childcare age children? At some point, because HR is then taking on the risk of having to hire more people because they can't find enough people, or they have to figure out ways to flex hours. At some point, your HR costs are going to be going so much that doesn't it almost make more sense to provide childcare, to do something with your childcare issues so that you're not spending that on, you know, more HR work in regards to finding and attracting a workforce. We're working on a local task force. We've got a bunch of great partners that have all come together, the city and county planning departments. We've got both health system providers in the area, the La Crosse School District. We've got our local Head Start program, as I said, the Parenting Place, and then a financial services provider called TrustPoint. And we're trying to look at some types of models, and I'm encouraged with the data that I saw earlier that I think I'll be providing to them. One option or thought was looking at a neighborhood provided type service that happened in Tangelo Park in Florida. As part of trying to understand what types of services would be the best fit for the La Crosse area, we've been harvesting and arranging with families in the area in 2 schools in particular where we have the highest volume of free and reduced lunch. We've been doing listening sessions that I've been facilitating with some of the staff here at Extension, and we're hearing just such a litany of stories that are so somewhat discouraging, somewhat aggravating, and you can see the complications that some of our systems have in regards to trying to cover and supply some sort of subsidy. We see a bigger prevalence of the number of kids that some of these families have. Some have in the range of 4 to 6 kids and their incomes are at sort of that lower or moderate wage. Many are working second and third shifts, and yet we don't have any providers that are providing childcare services after 6 p.m. in the area. The location of the provider, they might have a childcare provider where they can find capacity for their kids, but it's across town, and just the driving from school to there to back, it's a lot of time wasted in the car. There's still this issue of trust of the provider. Again, I'm not saying that we should try to increase the number of kids per childcare provider, and parents want to make sure that whomever they're having watch their kids, that they have trust for them. And then the issue of sick kids. A kid gets sick and the childcare provider doesn't want them at the center. And what is the parent to do? And oftentimes that can, and that inability to have childcare to where then the parent stays home causes then a disruption that prevents that parent from really excelling in that career, because the employee or the employer sees them maybe as less than dependent, and it causes all sorts of issues. So there is just this ripple of issues that you start to see because of childcare. That's the end of what I have, and so I guess I'll turn it back to Tessa and Kristen.
All right. Thanks so much, Carl. Thanks to everybody for participating in what has been a childcare lightning round. I know that there has been a lot to share. There's a lot more to share. I definitely wish we had more time for questions, but I just want to be respectful of time. So thank you, all of you, for being here with us for the conversation, and a special thank you to all of my speakers. I am happy to play a role in connecting people and sharing resources. So anything that you would like to add that didn't make it into the conversation today, please email me or put it in the chat. I'll be here for several more minutes, and I wish you all a good afternoon.
Thanks, Tessa. Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you all for coming, and a copy of this recording will be on the website at CED, and information about that will go out shortly. And I'll turn the floor over to Tessa and the rest of the speakers for questions if anyone has them.
Carol, this is Jenny, and I may have missed it, but how did you get data on the childcare providers that are like unregulated? How did you find them?
I don't think I have on the number of unregulated. The snippet that shows how many parents are using unregulated is from the survey that we did of employees within the different businesses that we surveyed. Our Parenting Place, which is the partner that does the certification and regulation of childcare in the area, they have estimates of it, but they don't have a good way to do it. And it's such a slippery slope of, is somebody actually providing childcare? Are they just watching a kid? It's a good point. The data that I have, or the slide that talks about it, though, I think is a employee that has reported they're using a uncertified or unregulated provider.
I was just thinking that I think about my child care provider. She was unregulated, undocumented, unclassified, whatever all the titles were. And I think it was just because she didn't really need any additional certifications. She was always booked. You know what I mean? It didn't do her any, was an advantage for her to be certified or licensed. Because she didn't need to be to fill her classes or whatever you want to call it. So I'm just wondering how many people may be switching over from being certified or licensed to just being uncertified and licensed because there's such a demand for their service. Does that show up? I mean, in terms of the number of childcare folks that are decreasing, is it because they're kind of going off the grid?
That's a great question, and that's, it's a very hard question to answer with anything but anecdotal evidence.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Do we have any other questions?
I would just mention that Jackson County, they have a child care task force, and they did a similar survey and found similar things, just the decrease in number of centers and really decrease in certified, or the centers that had gone through the accreditation. So they might be worth talking to as well about sort of the way that they found that data.
Green Bay did a similar one as well with Kids Forward. And I have that report. I could send it to you.
I've been curious too, Jesse, or any of you, could you speak to what kind of challenges there might be in terms of taking advantage of the dependent care account, for example? Does that have to be in partnership with a certified care center? Or, I mean, if you're paying somebody sort of in an unofficial capacity, are you not eligible to take advantage of some of these programs? Uh-oh.
Tessa, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Uh-oh.
We got you.
Sorry. Okay. There is a form, I'm not sure how much you heard me, but called 2441 that is a requirement if you file under the credit as well as on your 1040. There's this form that you have to submit. If you're going to claim it as an eligible expense, you take the risk of being audited at that time. But that's the only stipulation that I would say would be required from an IRS perspective. It can't be a relative like a spouse, for example, but it could be a grandma that's watching your kids after school. You just have to provide their social security number and a way of showing that you paid for those expenses. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, thanks, Jesse.
And then that person better be paying their Social Security and their quarterly estimated payments.
Well, actually, I think there is some type of minimum that has to be paid quarterly for payroll taxes to be required. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but I could find out and have our legal resources define that further.
All right, do we have any other questions? If not, seeing no other questions, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today and to our second Zoom. We'll have another one, same Wednesday, first business Wednesday of March. That one will be on media use and voting patterns and how people make sense of their state and local economies based on media use. But thank you very much today for our speakers. We appreciate it. This has been a thought-provoking and informative discussion. And we look forward to tapping you all as resources in the future, because once we find out who we can speak with, we do tend to foster those relationships. So again, thank you very much today.
Kristen, should we send you our presentations?
That would be great. Yeah, that would be great.
Get the other presentations.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.